Good morning, everyone, and have a happy and wonderful Chanukah. Today is the third day of Chanukah, and what an incredible 3 days of Chanukah we already had. We had the lighting of the menorah, we had family over Shabbat, and over the last about 18 hours, so many incredible events have been taking place. And this is the amazing thing. The governor has put restrictions on what kind of events we can have. And, there's two people that fail in life: those that don't have a plan and those that stick to the plan. So, of course, in light of the new restrictions, we couldn't stick to our previous plans. So we adjusted. And thank God, Baruch Hashem, the weather cooperated. And last night, hundreds of people continued the tradition of lighting the Grand Hanukkah menorah in Philadelphia in Independence Mall, right in front of Independence Hall on Independence Mall. Hundreds of people. How do you do that? Well, we all stayed in our cars. Every year, as my dad, may he live long and healthy years, for the last 47 years, lights a 30-foot menorah on Independence Mall. And this year wasn't going to be a different. And hundreds of people always gather on Saturday night to witness this lighting. How can we stop this tradition? Well, instead of everyone congregating on Independence Mall, we had this huge parade of cars. Everyone stayed in their cars with their own menorahs on the top and drove by in their cars. But the tradition continued as the menorah was being lit on this sacred, very important place. Here in Bucks County as well, we are continuing with our programs. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, to the great weather, so we can do whatever had to be done indoors can be taken outdoors, and therefore be able to, within the guidelines and restrictions and limitations, continue to celebrate Hanukkah. And so it is many of my colleagues around the country and around the world. We live with the reality. We see what we are allowed to do, and we make it work. Why? Because I think, and the reason why I mention this to you, is because many things in life has changed. There are many changes we are all experiencing over the last 8 months. But one thing cannot change. And one thing that cannot change is the connection of our Jewish life. And this Hanukkah, more than any, forces us to ask that question. Why not? Why can't we just shut down for a little bit? We'll always be there next year. And it forces us to ask the question, Hanukkah, the high holidays, all the other observances that we were able to plan in accordance to the guidelines that we've been given. And this forces us to ask the question, a very important question. What is Judaism for the Jew? And what is Judaism to the world? If Judaism is just a cultural thing, if it's a historical thing, if it's something that you do just to have the nostalgic feeling of what Bubby, Zadie, Grandma, Grandpa did one time in the past in your childhood, or even what you did a few years ago, but it's a cultural thing, then you know what? You could take a break. There's always next year, and why not shut down for these 8 months and then reopen again when things are good? It's at the end of the day, it's not going to make much of a difference anyway. However, if Judaism is your life, if Judaism is what gives your life meaning and purpose, direction and guidance, how could you shut down? Your life hasn't shut down in the last 8 months. You haven't stopped breathing in the last 8 months. God forbid you stop breathing for a second, there's no more life. And Judaism is what feeds your life. As oxygen feeds your body, your Jewish culture, your Jewish tradition feeds your soul and feeds your life with meaning, purpose, guidance, and direction. And therefore, we must always find a way to be able to observe the rituals, to connect to the spiritual energy in a way that is permitted, but in a way that is meaningful. And this, in a sense, is the lesson of Hanukkah. This is what we are celebrating at Hanukkah, an understanding of what Judaism is really all about, so that in the days that follow Hanukkah, we can live a more meaningful, not Jewish life, but through living a Jewish life, we can be living a more meaningful and purposeful and focused life in its very core. So let me discuss this with you for a moment. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to wait for 2 seconds, assuming that you will all be raising your hands, giving the answer. And that is, if I ask you a question, we're going to do 2 association questions. What is the symbol of Chanukah? What symbolizes Chanukah to everyone? I'm sure that many of you answered the menorah. The menorah is the symbol of celebrating Chanukah. I'm going to ask you another question. Which people are associated with Chanukah? Maybe a little more difficult question. But when I say, tell me some of the main heroes of the story of Chanukah, what will you answer? You may answer the Maccabees, and that is the correct answer. The Maccabees were the small Jewish family that overcame the great Greek Syrian armies to be able to defeat them and restore the sanctuary and the holiness of the temple that we discussed on Friday. So why do we light the menorah? Let me just see if why do we light the menorah? We light the menorah to commemorate the festival, the miracle of finding one jug of oil, instead of lasting for 1 day, lasted for 8 days. And I discussed that at length in the Friday sermon, and you can click there to find the significance of that. But I have a different question today. Today's question is, before they were able to find that jug of oil, there was a big battle. There was a life-threatening situation where their lives were at stake. You had a huge, let's call it superpower army, fighting against a little family, a little clan in Jerusalem that could have been wiped out. And instead, the few overcame the many. Isn't that a greater miracle? The survival of life itself? And therefore, my question is, why do we make the symbol and main celebration of Chanukah over a seemingly insignificant part of the story of a jug of oil, when the greater part of the story was the victory, life itself? And to put this question in context, we all know one of the modern day miracles of the Jewish people was the victorious 6-day war. That in 6 days, the Jewish people wiped out, well, I would say wiped out, but overcame the onslaught of the Arab neighbors from all 4 corners, all 4 sides of the country. In 6 days, they were able to defeat everyone. It was one of the greatest modern miracles that we've experienced. And when you talk about the 6-day war, you talk about the military victory that the Jewish people were able to have. Now, let me ask you a question. What would have happened if after the 6-day war, they would have gone into a big temple in Jerusalem, found a candle, and this candle would light for 8 days? Is that really the significant greatness of the 6-day war, other than the fact that Israel could have been wiped off the map of the world and they were able to survive and overcome? And therefore we'd say, well, that's nothing. The fact that the candle lit in the temple, in the synagogue in Jerusalem for 8 days, that's what we're going to celebrate. Why do we celebrate the fact that the Maccabees found a jug of oil that lasted for 8 days instead of the fact that they were alive? And herein lies the message of Chanukah. Because the war in Chanukah was not merely a physical war. It was a battle against the spiritual character of the Jewish people. The Greeks were very cultured people. They did not mind for the Jewish people to have a great culture. In fact, they loved the Jewish culture. It brought a lot of wisdom. It brought a lot of color to life in general. What bothered them, though, was that commitment to Judaism that was more than cultural, that was life-sustaining, that was something that defined a nature and a character to life that they couldn't understand and they did not want to accept. The idea of the battle and the victory of Chanukah was more about defining what Judaism is, more in addition to the survival of Judaism itself. Because when we survive with life, but life is directionless, in a sense, we've only gotten halfway. When we survive and are alive and are able to infuse it with a greater meaning and purpose, that's when you have fullness of life. And that's when you have the completion of the victory in the battle of Chanukah. And that is why we light the menorah, because the oil, that spiritual nature and character of the Jewish people, is what really caps the entire story of Chanukah and gives it definition. That it's not just about the survival of life, but the infusion into the life of the survivor themselves. That we don't just exist, we don't just appear on this world, but we appear with a greater purpose and greater meaning. That's what Judaism is. Judaism is when you wake up in the morning and you say your Modeh Ani, you realize that you're going through another 24 hours of life, but make sure those 24 hours you just aren't existing, but you're thriving with purpose and meaning. And that becomes so important during our current situation, which is why it's so important to find ways to celebrate Hanukkah today more than ever. I won't say more than ever, but as importantly as ever. We can't just shut down because of a pandemic. We have to find newer ways to celebrate, but to always continue to draw that oxygen, the spiritual oxygen that gives our life purpose and meaning. And I want to conclude with one little story, a very moving story that happened back in Bergen-Belsen during the Holocaust. There are many stories about a particular Hasidic Rebbe, the Bluzhever Rebbe, who was there in the camps with the Jewish people, just like everyone else. But because he was a Rebbe, because he was a Hasidic master, people constantly looked to him for leadership during the challenging times that they were in the Holocaust, in the concentration camp in Bergen-Belsen. And this story takes place the first night of Hanukkah, while they're in the camps. And that was a particularly hard and difficult day for the people there in the camp, the Jews, because many of the Jews were taken out randomly and shot. And the Nazis knew when there was a holiday, and they always tried to increase their dose of killings and assassinations and executions to kind of bring down the morale of the Jewish people even more. And so it was that Hanukkah Eve. When all the survivors came back, whoever was alive, they came back together in the camp. And the Bluzhever Rebbe says, tonight is Hanukkah. And quickly, similar to the story I mentioned last week, they found different things that they were able to create a menorah. In this case, they took a shoe. They tried to get some shoe polish that had some grease, took out some threads from their clothing, and there's a little menorah for the first night of Hanukkah in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. And a group of Jews are listening to the Rebbe, the Bluzhever Rebbe, as he's making the blessings. The first night of Hanukkah, we make 3 blessings. The first blessing, thank God for giving us this great mitzvah and opportunity to light the menorah. And the Rebbe makes that blessing. Then comes the second blessing. She'asa nisim la'avaseinu b'yamim ha'hem bizman hazeh. And we ask God, as he performed miracles, then he should perform miracles now as well. That was very appropriate for the concentration camp. Then came the third blessing. And the third blessing is a blessing of thanking God for bringing us and allowing us to be alive today in the situations we're in, to be able to perform the mitzvah, to bring us to where we are in life. And before he made the third blessing, he looks around. He looks at the crowd around him. He hesitates. And then with full vigor, makes the blessing. She'achiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Thank God. Blessed are you, the Lord, King of the universe, who has given us the life to be able to reach this moment. And they start to light the menorah. After the lighting of the menorah, one of the fellow Jews in the camp goes over to the Bluzhever Rebbe and asks him, how did you make that third blessing? Are we really thankful for God for allowing us to be alive here in the concentration? Is this the life that we're thankful for? I understand the first 2 blessings, we're doing a mitzvah, we want a miracle. But how do you thank God for putting us into this situation. I just don't understand. And the Blushevik Rebbe responds to him and says as follows. I had the same question. As you saw, I hesitated. Is this the right blessing to make at this time? Then I looked around the room, and I looked at a group of Jews that despite the darkness, and what greater darkness can there be than being in a concentration camp during the Holocaust? And I look at these Jews, and they're still committed to bring light into this dark place, that there's not any darkness that holds back a Jew from bringing the light of his soul into that situation. And when I saw everyone watching the menorah, I had to make that blessing because that itself is the greatest lesson. That Jews don't allow themselves to be put down by the darkness that surrounds them, but always find an opportunity to know that to be a Jew is to know that there's always a source of light that you can draw from to break any darkness. And that is the message of Chanukah. And that is the holiday of Chanukah, he says. And therefore, that blessing was more appropriate this year than any year before. And this, my friends, is the message we need to take as we continue to light the menorah. Even though you may be lighting it in different circumstances than in previous years, nonetheless, we are lighting the menorah, indoors and outdoors, alone or with family, or with others in a way that is permissible. But that light and that flame and that mitzvah can never be shut down. There isn't next year. Today I'm alive. Today I light my menorah. And I hope that we take this message through all the days that follow Chanukah. We're going to build one light, another light. Tonight we're going to light 4. In a few days it'll be 8. But it doesn't stop there. That just is the engine. It's the motivation to keep on going. And always realize there's never a level of darkness that is too dark that the light of the soul cannot penetrate. And if you ever doubt that, remember the story I just shared, and hopefully the lesson as well. There's a lot going on, and as always, I'm going to share our website where you can see what's still going on. Today's a big day. We have a teen event outdoors. We have a public menorah outdoors. We have a Friendship Circle virtual event. We have our classes. We have our other virtual events going on during the week. Log on to our website, see what's going on, participate, draw in the beautiful energy. But more importantly, don't just draw in the energy. Don't just celebrate Chanukah. Be inspired by Chanukah. And let a Chanukah be the inspiration that will help you to continue to light one candle at a time as we move through this darkness, through these challenging times, to the other side of this that will be hopefully filled with greater light, greater energy, and greater vigor for life. Have a wonderful Chanukah. And again, let me remind you, if anyone needs anything, a menorah or candles, or even latkes, or anything that we can bring to you, if you're not able to come out, let us know. We want to make sure that Chanukah is an event that will not go unnoticed this year and for years to come. Have a wonderful Chanukah, a wonderful celebration, meaningful and inspiring time. I'll see you Wednesday morning, Mirz Hashem, at 8:30 a.m.